I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change.
William stopped so abruptly that the folder in his hand nearly slipped to the floor. Through the partly closed door ahead came Camilla's voice, low and unusually tense. Then the lawyer spoke, and one phrase cut through the room with enough force to make William forget why he had come there in the first place. The conversation was about documents, financial records, and a legal arrangement that could affect the future of the royal family. He did not knock. William stood in the corridor, listening as the lawyer continued. The details were difficult to make out, but the tone was unmistakable. This was not an ordinary palace briefing. Papers were being moved across a table. Someone was speaking about what could happen if a certain arrangement was put into effect. Then Camilla asked a question that made William's expression change completely. The lawyer answered quietly, warning that once the documents were formally acted upon, reversing the decision could become extremely complicated. William stepped closer to the door. Until that moment, he had no reason to believe anything unusual was happening. He had expected a routine palace matter and had been prepared to collect the information he needed and leave. Instead, he had stumbled onto a private conversation involving Camilla and her legal advisor, with neither William nor Catherine apparently part of it. The secrecy alone was unsettling. The subject matter made it worse. Hi viewers, if you were William and discovered that a private legal meeting was taking place about something that could affect your own family's future, would you walk away and say nothing, or would you demand the truth? Tell us in the comments, because staying silent when something feels wrong can sometimes allow the mystery to grow. And if you believe William deserves answers, like this video, share it and subscribe. Your support is a simple way of saying that decisions affecting the future should never be hidden from the people who may have to live with them. Inside the room, the lawyer lowered his voice again. William caught only fragments, a reference to records, a reference to authority, then the words, future arrangements. That was enough. His attention moved from the voices to the narrow gap beneath the door. A shadow shifted inside. Someone had stood up. William reached for the handle. The door opened before he could turn it. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Camilla looked directly at him. The lawyer was seated beside a stack of papers, one hand resting firmly over a dark folder. His expression changed the moment he realized William had heard enough to become a problem. The room suddenly felt smaller. William's eyes moved across the table. There were several pages spread beneath the lawyer's hand. One appeared to contain financial information. Another carried formal wording that looked nothing like an ordinary diary note. A third page had handwritten markings in the margin. The lawyer instinctively pulled the papers together. William noticed. That tiny movement told him more than any explanation could have. Camilla spoke first, attempting to keep her voice calm. The discussion, she indicated, was confidential and concerned sensitive matters that required legal advice. But William did not move. He looked at the folder, then at the lawyer, and finally back at Camilla. The question hanging in the room was obvious. Why had a lawyer been discussing the future of the monarchy behind a closed door? And why had William not been told? The lawyer offered a careful explanation. The documents were being reviewed, not finalized. Nothing, he suggested, should be interpreted as a completed decision. It was a preliminary legal discussion, an examination of possibilities, a way of preparing for circumstances that might arise later. William listened. He did not interrupt. That silence made the room more uncomfortable, because the explanation sounded reasonable until one detail refused to fit. If nothing had been decided, why were there already financial records attached to the papers? William looked again at the folder. Camilla noticed where his eyes had settled. The lawyer closed it. That was the moment suspicion became something much heavier. William asked what was inside. The lawyer did not answer immediately. Camilla stepped closer to the table and told him that some matters had to remain confidential until they were properly reviewed, but that answer only created another question. Confidential from whom? William was not asking to know every private detail of Camilla's affairs. The issue was different. The documents appeared to touch matters far beyond one person's private business. The lawyer's language had mentioned future responsibilities, the financial records suggested consequences, and the fact that the discussion had taken place without William's knowledge made the entire situation impossible to dismiss as routine. Then William noticed something else. One sheet had not been covered completely. At the top were several words describing a proposed arrangement. Beneath them were references to legal authority, responsibilities, and future decisions. William leaned forward. The lawyer immediately placed his hand over the page. That reaction was unmistakable. Whatever was written there, it was something they did not want him to read. The room fell silent again. William's face hardened, but he remained controlled. He asked who had prepared the documents. The lawyer looked toward Camilla. Camilla did not answer. That single glance changed the balance of the room. Until then, William could still believe that Camilla had simply sought legal advice about a private matter, but the lawyer's hesitation suggested that someone else might have been involved before the meeting ever began. William asked the question again. Who prepared them? This time, the lawyer gave a carefully worded response. The papers had been assembled following discussions involving several people. He did not name them. William heard the words, but he was watching the folder. He knew that whatever was inside it mattered, and then the lawyer made one mistake. As he gathered the papers, a single page slipped loose and landed partly in view. William saw a phrase before the lawyer could retrieve it. Future royal arrangements. William's attention locked onto those 3 words. The private meeting had just become something else entirely. Because if the documents truly concerned the future structure of royal responsibilities, then this was no longer simply Camilla meeting her lawyer. Someone had been preparing something. Someone had discussed it. Someone had put it on paper. And somehow, William had been left outside the room until the moment he accidentally heard enough to ask questions. He looked at Camilla again. This time, he did not ask what the meeting was about. He asked the question that mattered more. Who had authorized it? Nobody answered. And that silence was the first sign that the secret William had walked in on might be much larger than Camilla herself. The lawyer's hand remained pressed against the folder. William did not look away. The room had gone so quiet that the faint sound of rain against the windows seemed louder than before. Camilla stood beside the table, watching him carefully, while the lawyer gathered the loose papers into a neat stack. The movement was deliberate, too deliberate. William had seen enough to understand that the people in the room were no longer simply discussing confidential legal advice. They were deciding how much of that advice he was allowed to know. He stepped closer to the table. The lawyer finally explained that the papers concerned possible future arrangements and that nothing had been formally approved. The wording was cautious, almost rehearsed. But William was not satisfied. If the proposal was nothing more than an early discussion, why had financial records already been assembled? Why were responsibilities being examined? And why had the conversation taken place privately, without Kensington Palace being represented? Those questions hung over the room. Camilla attempted to calm the situation. She indicated that legal consultations could involve sensitive matters and that preliminary documents were sometimes prepared long before any decision was made. Her explanation was reasonable on the surface. Yet William had heard enough to notice what was missing. Nobody had actually told him what the arrangement was. The lawyer opened his mouth, then stopped. William noticed the hesitation immediately. He asked whether the arrangement involved his future responsibilities. No answer came. He asked whether it involved Catherine. Another pause. That pause was enough. William's attention returned to the papers. One page had been turned slightly away from him. The lawyer seemed determined to keep it hidden. William did not reach for it. He simply stood there, waiting. Eventually, the lawyer explained that Catherine's name appeared in the material because any discussion concerning future royal responsibilities could potentially involve several senior members of the family. That answer changed the atmosphere. Catherine had not merely been mentioned in passing. Her future role was somewhere inside the paperwork. William asked what the documents proposed. The lawyer refused to give him the full details. Instead, he said that the material examined several possible scenarios involving responsibilities, financial administration, and the organization of royal duties during future periods of transition. William heard the word transition. It was the same kind of language that could make an ordinary administrative proposal sound harmless while concealing something much more significant. He asked who had requested the legal review. The lawyer looked at Camilla. Camilla remained silent. William understood the implication immediately. Someone had initiated the process. The lawyer had not simply decided on his own to prepare these papers. Someone had brought him the issue. Someone had provided the information. Someone had asked him to examine what could legally be done. But who? The lawyer finally said that the instructions had come through established channels. William's expression hardened. Established channels was not a name. It was an answer designed to avoid giving one. He asked again, "Who gave the instruction?" This time, Camilla interrupted. She reminded him that legal advice was confidential and that it would be inappropriate to disclose every communication surrounding it. William did not argue. Instead, he looked toward the folder once more. The most important question was no longer who had arranged the meeting, it was what the meeting was preparing. Because if the papers involved financial records, legal authority, and future royal responsibilities, then the consequences could extend far beyond one private conversation. The story surrounding the meeting had now become a question of power. Not power in the dramatic sense of commands and confrontation, but something quieter. The kind of power created by paperwork, approvals, schedules, legal advice, and decisions made before the wider family ever hears about them. William knew that. He had spent years watching how small administrative choices could become larger decisions once they reached the public stage. A change in one document could alter who attended an event. A change in briefing authority could determine which household controlled the information. A change in legal responsibility could influence who handled a future decision. One paper could appear harmless. A series of papers could create an entirely different structure. That possibility was what disturbed him. The lawyer eventually allowed William to see one page. It contained headings rather than a final agreement. There were references to financial responsibilities, administrative authority, future public duties, and possible contingencies. William read slowly. Nothing on the page openly accused anyone of wrongdoing. That was precisely why it was difficult to dismiss. The language was technical, careful, neutral, almost boring. Yet beneath that language was a question that could not be ignored. Who would gain authority if the proposed arrangement ever became reality? William reached the bottom of the page. There was a section marked for further legal review. Beside it was a handwritten notation. William leaned closer. The lawyer immediately moved the page. William saw only part of the sentence. It referred to a future decision and the need to preserve stability. Stability, that word sounded harmless, but William had learned something important during the meeting. Words such as stability, continuity, and preparation could describe almost anything. They could describe ordinary planning. They could also conceal a struggle over who would control what happened next. William asked whether the arrangement had already been discussed with the king. The lawyer did not answer. Camilla finally said that the relevant people would be informed when appropriate. That was the moment William realized how serious the situation might be. If the king had already been informed, why was nobody saying so? And if he had not been informed, why was such an important legal discussion happening at all? William left the room with more questions than answers. The door closed behind him, but the mystery followed him down the corridor. He no longer believed that the meeting was simply about Camilla. There was a larger structure behind the documents, and somewhere inside that structure was Catherine's name. That was the detail he could not forget. On the journey back, William replayed every word he had heard. The financial records, the legal review, the references to future responsibilities, the careful refusal to identify who had requested the work. Then another memory surfaced. Recent palace decisions that had seemed insignificant at the time. A schedule changed without much explanation. A briefing adjusted after plans had already been circulated, a responsibility discussed in one office and later described differently in another. None of those incidents proved anything, but together they raised a disturbing possibility. Perhaps the meeting was not the beginning. Perhaps it was simply the first time William had seen the machinery behind it, and if that was true, then the question was no longer whether Camilla had something to hide. The question was how long the arrangement had been taking shape. By the time William reached Catherine, he had already made one decision. He would not confront anyone publicly, he would not accuse anyone without knowing the facts. He would find the documents first, then he would find out who created them. Catherine listened as William described what he had discovered. She remained quiet when he mentioned the lawyer. She became more attentive when he described the financial records. Then William told her that her name appeared in the paperwork. Her expression changed, not because she knew what the documents meant, because she realized someone had been discussing her future without her being present. William placed the few details he remembered before her: the proposed arrangement, the legal review, the financial records, the references to future responsibilities, and the unanswered question of who had initiated it. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then Catherine focused on one detail: the handwritten note. William told her he had seen only part of it. Catherine asked what it said. William could not give her the complete sentence, but he remembered two words clearly: preserve stability. And that was when the real mystery began, because stability for whom was never explained. And if the arrangement was truly harmless, there was one question that still had no answer. Why had William needed to discover it by accident? The next morning, William returned to the documents. The folder had been closed. The conversation was over, yet one question refused to leave him. Why had someone been preparing a legal arrangement involving future royal responsibilities without first making the people affected by it part of the discussion? He spread the notes across the table and began rebuilding the sequence from memory. The financial records came first, then references to authority and future responsibilities. None of it, taken alone, proved that anything improper had happened. Palace planning could involve confidential advice, and legal consultations could remain private for perfectly legitimate reasons. But the pattern was beginning to trouble him. William looked back at recent changes that had seemed too small to matter. A briefing had arrived later than expected. A proposed schedule had been altered after earlier discussions. Another responsibility had been described one way by one household and differently by another. Each incident had been easy to explain away as miscommunication. Now those explanations felt incomplete. The possibility remained only a suspicion, but William could not ignore it. He needed records, not assumptions. He wanted to know when the legal review began, who supplied the financial material, who requested the documents, and which people had been consulted before the meeting with Camilla. The answer did not come quickly. Some details were missing from the copies available to him. That was what made the situation more unsettling. The documents he had seen were not a finished agreement. They were working papers, drafts, notes, preliminary material. Preliminary did not mean meaningless. Someone had spent time preparing them. Someone had decided the questions were important enough to place before a lawyer, and someone had apparently considered consequences that reached beyond one person's private affairs. William eventually returned to the detail that concerned him most: Catherine's name. The paperwork did not simply mention her. It appeared to place her future responsibilities into specific categories. A casual reference would have been easy to dismiss. A structured list suggested planning. William arranged the information again: public duties, financial responsibilities, future arrangements, administrative authority. Catherine. The more he looked, the more he understood why the meeting felt wrong. There was no obvious attack against Catherine, no demand that she disappear from public life, no language openly challenging her position. The concern was quieter. If certain responsibilities were assigned elsewhere, Catherine could remain visible while having less influence over the occasions that carried the greatest institutional weight. That possibility was still only an interpretation of incomplete material, but it was enough to demand an explanation. When William finally spoke to Catherine again, he did not tell her what to think. He showed her what he knew. She studied the details carefully. Her reaction was not anger, it was disappointment. For Catherine, the unsettling part was not the possibility of changing responsibilities. Royal duties changed. Circumstances changed. Schedules changed. What disturbed her was the idea that decisions about those changes might already be taking shape without her knowledge. William told her about the handwritten note. Preserve stability. Those words had stayed with him. Catherine asked what came before them. William could not remember. That missing portion suddenly became important. If the note had been written beside her section, then the words preceding it could reveal what kind of stability the writer meant. Was it financial stability, institutional stability, public stability, or something connected to the balance between different royal households? Nobody could answer. William decided that guessing would only make matters worse. He contacted someone who understood palace procedure deeply enough to separate a genuine administrative issue from a serious breach of process. The response was cautious. Private legal advice was not automatically suspicious. Draft documents were not automatically decisions. But if a proposed legal structure affected senior royal responsibilities, then the identity of the people who commissioned and reviewed that structure mattered. That answer gave William a new direction. He stopped asking only what the arrangement said. He began asking who had touched it, who had drafted the first version, who had revised it, who had supplied the financial information, who had requested the legal opinion, and who had removed the missing section before the document reached the table. That question bothered him most, because the version he had seen was incomplete. Someone had either withheld part of it or produced a copy that did not contain everything discussed. William requested a fuller record. Later, another set of papers appeared. They looked almost identical to the first documents. Almost. One page was different. The headings remained the same, but the section concerning future responsibilities had been expanded. Catherine's name was still present. The language around her role was still careful, but beneath it was a line that had not appeared in the first copy. It suggested that certain responsibilities should remain under existing arrangements until a later review. The arrangement was not simply postponing a decision for a few weeks. It could delay a change in responsibilities for a considerable period. William looked toward the bottom of the page. There was a reference number, and beneath that number was the name of the legal office handling the review. The lawyer's name was not the only name attached to the process. There was another entry. A requester. The discovery gave him something concrete, not a rumor, not an interpretation. A name. But before he could decide what that name meant, he noticed something else. The page he had just received was still missing the section that explained why the arrangement had been requested in the first place. That was the piece everyone seemed determined to keep away from him. And now William had a new problem. He had found the person connected to the request, but he still did not know what that person had actually asked the lawyer to prepare. The lawyer's admission changed the meaning of everything William had heard that afternoon. He had entered that room believing the mystery began with Camilla and her lawyer. Now he understood that the lawyer had only been brought in after someone else had already developed the idea. There had been another conversation, another review, another set of decisions made before William ever touched the door handle. The question was no longer whether the documents were genuine working papers. They were. The question was who had decided they needed to exist. William returned to the page containing the reference number. He examined it again, searching for anything that could explain the chain of instructions. The document showed that the legal review had been commissioned after discussions involving several advisors, but it did not identify the original source of the proposal. That omission was becoming impossible to ignore. If the arrangement was harmless, why was its origin so difficult to establish? William remained careful. He did not accuse Camilla of secretly plotting against him. He did not claim the lawyer had acted improperly. He understood that legal advice could be confidential, and that royal households regularly prepared contingency plans for circumstances that might never occur. But this was different in one important respect. The proposed arrangement touched people who had not been included in the original discussion: William, Catherine, and potentially the wider future structure of the monarchy. That was why the secrecy mattered. The documents appeared to contemplate a future in which certain responsibilities could remain within existing channels while others were redistributed later. Financial and administrative questions had been placed beside questions about royal duties. The language was cautious, but the implications were not insignificant. William began looking at the situation from another angle. Perhaps the real objective was not to remove anyone, perhaps it was to control the timing of change. If responsibilities remained where they were for long enough, the existing structure could become normal. A temporary arrangement could become accepted simply because people became accustomed to it. That possibility unsettled him more than an obvious confrontation would have. Open opposition could be challenged. A quiet arrangement was harder to fight because nothing dramatic had happened. No public announcement, no formal decision, no confrontation, just paperwork, one draft after another, one legal consultation after another, one private conversation after another, and eventually, perhaps, a structure that everyone treated as inevitable. William thought again about Catherine. Her name had appeared in the papers, but there had been no direct conversation with her before the arrangement was discussed. She had not been asked how she viewed the possible changes. She had not been shown the documents. Yet her responsibilities were already being considered. That was the part William found hardest to accept. Catherine had built her public role gradually. Her work had become associated with children, families, early years initiatives, and charitable causes. If those responsibilities remained hers, nobody outside the institution might immediately notice anything unusual. She could remain visible. She could continue attending engagements. She could continue receiving public praise. But visibility and authority were not necessarily the same thing. That distinction now seemed central to the entire mystery. William understood that a person could remain respected while having less influence over the occasions that defined the institution. And if the proposed arrangement had been designed to manage who handled the most important responsibilities during a future period of change, then the real issue was not simply where Catherine appeared, it was where decisions were made. William eventually demanded that the full chain of preparation be documented. Who drafted the original proposal? Who supplied the financial records? Who commissioned the first legal review? Who revised the language? Who added the references to Catherine? Who decided that the matter should be discussed privately? And why had Kensington Palace not been consulted at the beginning? The questions were straightforward, the answers were not. Camilla maintained that the discussions were intended to protect continuity and prevent confusion during uncertain circumstances. There was no public evidence within the storyline that a final legal decision had been enacted. The papers remained proposals rather than established changes, but William had stopped treating the proposal as insignificant. A proposal could reveal what people were considering. That was enough. The lawyer's role was also becoming clearer. He had not created the arrangement. He had been asked to assess it. Another legal advisor had apparently been consulted before him. That meant the process had already developed layers. William wanted to know who had spoken to the first advisor. He asked again. This time the answer remained incomplete. The original instruction had come through a channel connected to senior royal planning. No specific individual was identified, and there it was, the final barrier. William had discovered the meeting. He had seen the papers. He had found the financial records. He had learned that Catherine's future responsibilities were being considered. He had discovered that the lawyer was not the first legal advisor involved. Yet the identity of the person who started the process remained hidden. That unanswered question became more important than anything else, because it changed how William viewed Camilla. She might have been driving the process. She might have been protecting an existing arrangement. She might simply have been receiving advice about something initiated elsewhere. The documents alone could not establish which explanation was correct, and that uncertainty was precisely what made the situation so compelling. William eventually spoke with Catherine again. He explained that he still did not have the complete answer. She listened. Neither of them turned the situation into a public confrontation. Instead, they agreed on one principle. If a proposal affected their future responsibilities, they needed to know about it before the proposal became reality. That was the quiet consequence of the entire episode, not a dramatic palace showdown, not an explosive public accusation, a demand for transparency. William's concern had begun with one overheard conversation. It had grown into questions about paperwork. Then those questions had become questions about authority. And finally, they had become a question about who had been shaping the future before the people most directly affected had even been invited into the conversation. The original mystery remained. Who started it? Who first decided that a legal arrangement was necessary? Who approached the first advisor? Who provided the financial information? And who decided that William and Catherine could be kept outside the process until later? Those questions could not be answered simply by pointing at Camilla. That was the final twist. William had caught Camilla with her lawyer, exactly as the story began. But the meeting may not have been the beginning of the secret. It may have been the middle. And if that was true, then the most important person in the entire story was not sitting at the table when William opened the door. That person was somewhere earlier in the chain, somewhere behind the documents, behind the legal advice, behind the financial records, and perhaps behind the decision to keep the entire process quiet. Hi viewers, if you believe William deserved to know what was being prepared before decisions about his future were allowed to move forward, then say it plainly in the comments. William deserved answers. Like this video, share it with someone who follows royal stories, and subscribe. If viewers remain silent, unanswered questions remain unanswered. But when thousands of people speak up, the mystery becomes impossible to ignore. The most revealing detail was never the argument William might have had with Camilla. It was the silence that followed one simple question: who authorized it? Nobody gave him a name, and until that name is known, the documents tell only half the story. Because William did not simply discover Camilla meeting her lawyer. He discovered that someone had been thinking about the future of the monarchy before he knew there was anything to discuss, and somewhere in that hidden chain of conversations, one person made the first move. That is the question that remains. Who was it, and why was William the last person to find out?